Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Leanne Chukoskie, and I am delighted to be here today. Thank you so much for the invitation. I am coming back to you away for 4 years. I'm now an associate professor at Northeastern University, appointed in departments of physical therapy and in art and design, specifically games. And I am really happy to come here because I've always considered UC San Diego, the Temple Dynamics of Learning, INC, to be the place where I can come to get feedback on new ideas, and I've got one. So I really want you to be, although I know I don't need this, tell me what you think, because I really need feedback, because this is a new thing. All right. So those of you who are associated with the Temporal Dynamics of Learning Center, hopefully this triggers happy memories. It's going to be about time, focus on timing and orienting and behavior. And so let me get to the place where I can actually advance my slides. It's funny. I think it's because I have two instances of this open, but it won't.
How intriguing.
Yeah, I agree. Is there a second? Is it presented someplace else? Is that?
Leanne, is that a service dog?
No, that is actually King Husky. We have several different types of dogs on campus. That one is actually, I would say, the least servicey of the service dogs. There are more like comfort dogs on campus. They tend to be Labradors. Those of you who've had the pleasure of being around Huskies, they know that they are gorgeous, regal, wonderful dogs, but maybe not the best comfort animals. I don't know, we'll see, for college students. So, but yes, he is our sort of our mascot. And there we are. And so now I can go back to the Zoom. So, but yes, they have birthday parties for the different pets. The students love it. So they have like ice cream, cupcakes, what have you. But yes, that is the current King Husky, because we are the Huskies. Now I can actually continue with my slides. Thank you so much, Mike. It's always fun to come back to a spot. So many of you have actually seen this before, and I love this still. And I'm now getting back to actually looking at the links between eye movements and manual movements. So what you can see, although it's glitchy online, is the gaze behavior shown by the green dots with my hand while I'm putting together this puzzle toy. And if it wasn't quite so glitchy, unfortunately, you would see that there's really tight timing between the look to one of the pieces and how it inserts when you go to grab it and inserting it. And there's this back and forth between the puzzle, the place where it's going to be, and my hand as I'm grabbing it. And so we unfortunately don't know as much as we should about that behavior and timing. Although we study eye movements a lot, we study manual movements, we don't necessarily study them naturally and together. And so I'm particularly interested in individuals who have developed differently. I'm particularly interested in studying individuals who identify as autistic. I'm using that language intentionally. It tends to be preferred by adults who have a developmental condition called autism. So I'm specifically proposing that gaze movement and timing, especially in coordinated, more complex movements, are disrupted in these conditions, and that actually really matters for social interaction. We'll be talking about characterizing that problem and then the potential opportunities that come from that if we can get this right. So let's focus on the hypothesis. So I'm going to start with some data that's actually kind of old. This is a study from Catania in 2007. I'm trying to paint a picture, not just with my own work, but with the work that's out there in the literature, that we've actually known that these things were there, and we just didn't really know what to do with them. There were sort of like little bits of findings in the literature. So this is a study where children were asked to take a piece of food that was placed on a plate in front of them. As you can see, let me get my mouse up here in this top set of images, and they are placing the piece of food into their mouth. And the measurement here is with EMG on the jaw to measure the preparatory movement of the mouse in preparation of receiving that piece of food. the similar movement that's being compared to is when the piece of food is picked up and put very close to the mouth, but in a cup on the shoulder, right? So what they found when they did this with children who are autistic and children who are not autistic, measuring that, maybe I shouldn't go back and forth between these two because now I need to advance my slides, is that when you're looking at typically developing children in the top slide, when they are eating, there is this large preparatory movement measured in the EEG about a second in advance. You can see that in the red line. Before the time the piece of food hits their mouth, they're preparing to ready their mouth to eat it. But that does not happen if you look at the left-hand panel with the children with autism. There is no difference in the preparation of the mouth to eat the piece of food. It's exactly the same EMG, whether you're looking at this movement or this movement, suggesting that there is this coordination of movement that happens with children typically, but not necessarily with autism. And small finding in space. We certainly know a lot about Ami Klin's work in 2002, sort of kicked off a near cottage industry of looking at where people look in mostly in social interactions, on faces. We still don't know a ton about when. That's something that we're looking at more, but we know that there are differences in patterns of gaze, including in dynamic situations. This was that very first study from Ami Klin in 2002, looking at videos of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. The pattern shown on the image in white is the typical quote unquote gaze pattern, back and forth between the two actors in focusing on their eyes. And then the pattern in black down below is showing the pattern of an autistic participant not looking at the eyes. So again, this is a spatial pattern that's been well characterized, but we don't necessarily know about time. This is yet another one of these findings that are in the literature. So my research in the last 4 years has tried to go about characterizing movements in a more natural context, and particularly the timing that occurs between bits of movements. And so we went about this really focusing on visual motor interaction. I had a fantastic student who just did a short postdoc with me, and has a job now at Amazon as a technical learning design engineer. Well, so it's wonderful. So she was really interested in using virtual reality to try to make these measurements. So she's thinking about this classic behavior we have as a throw and the things that you need to do to get this right. So we need to incorporate visual information from the target and your own proprioceptive information from your arm. In order to get that right, you're interested in taking things like, planning that movement. We use our prior knowledge to estimate what's coming and like how we can optimize on the consequence of the movement. And then we take in visual information, some of which is task relevant. And we are interested in guiding that toward a good output. But the success or failure of that output feeds back so that we actually have a more, shall we say, successful opportunity next time. So what's happening here with, we believe in the autistic condition with visual motor integration is that there's a little bit more difficulty in selecting what's salient for the task. So that task relevant information tends to get a little bit more muddied. And when that comes in to participate in the specification of the movement, there's a lot more challenge. And so this is our view of how this goes. So gross motor activities are really, really important. They're measured in a lot of different standardized batteries. I'm showing you one of them here. This is the MABC. We also use them a lot in games. So in virtual reality games or other games, we're particularly making these measurements in virtual reality as well as the physical environment, which we're labeling VR and PE. Partly because the virtual environment provides one of great control, right? So we can try to approximate a real world environment, but we got things that we can mess around with. So in this study, we're measuring movement, but we're particularly interested in the role that visual information plays. So how much the environment plays a role in this kind of throwing behavior. And what I'm going to show you is just some data about timing and movement, but then also about visual clutter. And so what we did is we took the actual lab shown up there in PE, and we brought it into virtual reality. We scanned it, and so now we can actually have a real replica of the lab in virtual reality, and we can throw a ball just like you would in the real world. And we can compare those two conditions, except that in the real world, we don't have this cool robot hand that's disembodied. Actually, in the real world, you see your actual hand. Of course, also, and we can talk about this, one of the big differences in this study is that you don't feel picking up the ball in virtual reality, right? And there's no haptic feedback. So this overhand throw, pretty classic. We're also doing this in 2 virtual and real world conditions with a regular. And then, like most good labs, I have a lot of junk on the shelves. And we are trying to remove that junk, remove the clutter with a screen that exists in the real world and that we also brought into the virtual world. Okay, so let me show you one more thing. We're using, in the virtual world, we're using Pupil Labs and some motion capture cameras from Vicon. And then in VR, we're using the Vive ecosystem because we had it, it's excellent. Our participants were, oh, I'm sorry, this is a little old. We're now up to, I think the final published study was 20 and 20, or maybe it was 19 and 19, but it was larger than 16 and 16. And I'll choose that second. So this is showing you the comparison. There's no differences in the standardized scores on intelligence tests, but there is the score on this social responsiveness scale as a screener tool for autism. The individuals who identify as autistic have much higher scores, indicative of the fact that they are autistic. And so that means that they, in this questionnaire, just respond more to having challenges in social interaction scenarios. Okay, so that's our population. We are measuring throwing accuracy, and so the structure of the data is going to look very much like this. So that you can see these publications, the Eye Tracking Research Association in 2024, and a paper in IEEE Transactions, Neural Systems, and Rehab Engineering this year. First, I'm going to show you success rate and then error. So always, 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 the red is going to be autistic data, and then non-autistic data in pink. And then we're going to look at 3 different throwing distances. So really well-behaved data. So in the physical environment, the success of autistic participants is a little lower, and in VR, it's nearly similar. But when I say well-behaved data, it means that their success rate drops with distance, just like you'd expect it to. And you see that in panel B in both the physical environment and in VR. When we move to look at error, it's not surprising. It kind of is the flip of that. The error gets bigger with distance, and it's even bigger in VR, right? So, and this is not surprising. It's bigger in VR with typical observers as well as, like, it's not like typical observers perform fantastically in VR. Everybody performs a little worse in VR. So
does the VR have stereo?
Stereo vision?
Binocular depth perception.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, when you're looking out in the world, you have binocular depth perception. You have 2 eyes, and the disparity between them tells you depth.
Yes, but it's weird in VR, right? So VR, I mean, it's like it's a strange mix, right? Because it's faked, right? So because it's a constructed world, but yes, there is.
So the question is, do they include disparity in their constructed world? They could.
They absolutely could. It's just that I'm trying to refresh my memory of the talk we give about the dangers of VR, because this is one of the challenges, and it's different for every different headset and pair of lenses and how exactly they solve this problem. But they do try to provide that signal, but it's going to be a little bit different for every different one. The lenses in the Vive are pretty good. Some of the newer Meta headsets are cheaper and not as nice. But so yes, you're going to get, but I haven't characterized the disparity perception in VR compared with the real world. That's a good point.
Well, what's the resolution?
Spatial, it's definitely like an HD level of, so visually it's quite beautiful, but it's old, right? So it's not anything like the Vision Pro. We use it because it has integrated eye tracking, and you still could actually measure something with eye tracking. We can talk about that later, the limits that tech puts on what we're able to get out of these tools. The Vision Pro, I'd love to use, but you can't actually get the eye tracking data out of it, period. So no. So yeah, but yeah, the display is much better. So I'm just showing that this is what we asked participants to do, and I'm showing you what's going on in terms of areas of interest that we're going to measure with the ball, the goal, the intended target with the basketball hoop, and then other things going on with respect to preparation and movement. Okay, so we're going to particularly look at the preparation time and the moving time. We'll look at these different areas of interest. I'm particularly interested in something called quiet eye duration, and I'll explain why in a little bit, but it's the time before you make a throw, the last fixation before you make a manual movement. And then the eye following is a period of time after you make a movement. How does your gaze follow that? And so we're looking at all of those. So we're particularly interested here in looking at these visual motor processes and how they impact throwing accuracy in VR. And so we looked at things like the release velocity. Not much going on here. There's really not that big of a difference between groups. There is a little bit of a difference between the physical world and VR for each group, but between the groups, there's not. Okay. What's going on with grasping duration? There's a small difference in both the between groups in the physical world and in VR, with the duration of grasping longer for the non-autistic observers. So they're just that's suggesting maybe that preparation is a little less extensive for the autistic individuals. And then you can look at that either in total time or in terms of percent. And then I'm really interested in gaze behavior. So I'm interested in how people are choosing to look between the goal, the ball, and anything else in the scene. And so we constructed these plots which show the shift from one thing to the other. So if we take A on the top, the one for autism, the heavy blue line going from, I know I'm on the right slide. No, I'm not yet. Yeah, from goal to ball, it's blue. Here, this thick line, so that's like the most thing that happens, but then the second most thing would be from ball to other, right? But then ball back to goal is a relatively small proportion. So that's what this is showing, and you can compare it with the non-autistic situation. What I'd like you to see is that things change dramatically in terms of how we look at the virtual environment. And yes, we did ask people about their relative experience with VR. There were no differences between groups, but VR is weird and people experience it differently. So they certainly look at it differently. So people spent a lot more time looking at anything else except the ball and the goal, which is weird. That is not what I expected, but that was definitely the case. Okay. So now.
That was to try to gauge distance.
So we gave people a some practice rounds, so it's not like they had to do that. This is a puzzling finding for us, right? Other people have seen signs of it, but they didn't measure it quite as, like 3 buckets, this important thing, or anything else. And I think it just comes out really clearly when you do it that way, that like, everything else is fascinating. Yes.
Good question. I never thought to ask this myself when I was dealing with the eye tracking data, but do you see any difference with the IXYZ data that you get in the data recorded by the virtual reality headsets that are right on the eye, as compared to those that are near the monitors? That are a little distant, they're recording the eye movement from a distance. So I fortunately had the
I remember that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I said move more. Yeah.
Unfortunately, but it is the virtual reality, and that is promising because it's right on the eye. But the ones that are recording, let's say, from a distance, especially let's say with children who are moving, and this is very important. So how will you show that the XYZ data that we get then of the eye is accurate about the saccades, the dog procedures,
Yep.
that, can you explain this? Oh,
Yeah, so we're not doing screen based. We're doing either wearable, like People Labs glasses. But you have highlighted an important problem, and Terry was highlighting a piece of that. He was talking about disparity in VR. We are not yet good with measuring eye tracking in depth. We don't have good calibration means. We don't, and so they just kind of like wash it away in VR by saying like we raycast, we project onto effectively a plane. But in eye tracking with glasses, we calibrate to a plane. And then you get some sort of reasonable calibration in a volume around that, but it's not perfect. There are some people in People Labs who've been trying to mess with it. I tried actually while I was here to use like a, what do they call, like a Kinect type camera in order to map the space and try to calibrate a volume. I think I was not able to do it as well as I would have liked to, but I think that is the next thing, is like, how do we calibrate a volume of space? Because we can't get data. It's actually Gary Cottrell wanted to do a thing. He wanted to look at how people distribute their gaze naturally in the world. So like we have an understanding of frequency of language in the world. We have a frequency of things you look at in the world or features you look at in the world. In order to do that well, you really need to have a calibrated volume, or you're just guessing. And so I think we're kind of limited until we get
right, eye tracking SMI, or
the SMI tool.
yeah,
So they're no longer in existence. I've used it, but it wasn't one of my main types of eye trackers. I can talk to you later about the eye trackers that we have and what we use. But yeah, we are kind of limited by the available tools. But I think that developments in computer science, we can get further. Okay, so, and this is just a summary of what you saw in terms of the physical environment and the VR. It's really, really impressive at how much less people look at the bull in particular in VR. Okay, so this, I'm really interested in quiet eye duration. This was a big effect. And this is why I drug you through this whole experiment, is about time, right? So the amount of time people spend, I mean, remember, red is autism, pink is non-autistic. So the quiet eye duration is so much longer in both the physical environment and in VR, preparing for that throw in these conditions. There's a massive difference. There's no substantial difference between the two in eye following. But this really says something about like my gaze to prepare for the throw is different. And this is like the first piece that I want to carry over into a next study and say that I think we've got some like movement component difference problems that contribute to differences in how we might perceive movement. So we ran a general linear model of all this data because there's a significant amount, and the kind of things that correlated with a decrease in throwing error for the autistic subjects was a decrease in the number of shifts of gaze. They just made more saccades, generally speaking, an increase in quiet eye duration related to better throwing accuracy, lower error, and increase in eye following duration, but that was weak, right? Because there wasn't really that much there if you go back, right? In the non-autistic case, it was increase in fixation duration on relevant task areas and increase in that hand preparation time. So there are these two different things came out of the model, suggesting that we are actually maybe doing this a little differently, right? If we can believe how the model interprets things. And then I want to show you this result, because we wanted to collect this data for reasons of timing and really getting into not an interception task, which is what a lot of people look at for prediction in movement tasks in autism, but this throwing task. And we thought that there would be a lot better performance in autism in the simplified environment. And that is in fact what we saw. That the effect of clutter, if you look at the VR simple, so A on the right, VR simple, the autistic performance pops way up. They get better. They get better than they are in the physical environment and better than they are in the physical environment, even when there's clutter. So So the interesting thing is that they didn't necessarily get better in the physical environment in the simplified case, right? So it was really that when these cues were sort of in combination, or there was some sort of maybe like if you're thinking about this in like a Bayesian sense, like there's a challenge with the reliability of your information in VR, the reduction of the clutter made a huge difference in the success rate, only in the autistic performers. I thought that was really interesting. I think that's actually an interesting finding for like, we can change the environment to improve success. It's something that matters in games. Like you don't really want to play a game where you keep losing all the time. Like we can actually change some things to make it useful. So that's one thing that I find interesting. Release velocity had no significant difference between these cases. And there really wasn't much either in terms of grasping duration differences, very, very slight. Here though, too, so if we're gonna look at gaze behavior in the VR simple condition, if you look at the sort of grayed out version in A on the top, compare it with the fourth one over, so the VR simple versus VR, there's sort of a recovery of looking at the relevant parts of the scene. So we're looking more at the ball and the goal and back and forth between them and less at the other things. So I'm really excited about this, but I think it's a more applied thing. The thing that really is floating my boat. So again, there's this change in quiet eye behavior, but that wasn't nearly as big. So it wasn't like a whole lot of recovery, just a little bit of autistic quiet eye behavior, but it was something. If you compare it with the VR, it's now more than the quiet eye duration with the non-autistic population, but there was variability in that group. So I don't know quite what to make of that. Really not much of a difference in eye following though after. There wasn't before either. This is the thing with respect to this talk and this talk about timing. The time between the last fixation and the start of the throw is different. It's different in the physical environment. It's different in VR. It's different in a cluttered environment with autistic individuals. And so this is where I feel like there's this shorter amount of time between the last fixation and the time to throw, really limiting if there needs to be any correction, it's not there. If there's the literature suggests that the duration of quiet eye relates to your likely precision, and this would suggest that you're likely to have a less precise throw. So let's put a pause on that and say we found timing differences as well as differences in how visual information can be taken in some environments. And I now want to shift to thinking about social interaction, because that's where I'm really thinking that movement and how one moves and how that movement is understood by others can really matter for the way we interact with each other. So this is a slide from there. There are two women who I absolutely need to meet, and they both are in the UK. One is a woman named Antonia Hamilton. If anybody knows her, I'd love an introduction. The other one is Jennifer Cook. We'll get to Jennifer's work in a minute. But we're all chasing, I think, something similar, and I'm excited about that. So she's thinking about all these different interactive processes, the physical elements and the cognitive elements that are coming together to really make social interaction. And part of the reason why I am here today is because I've been trying to chase pieces of this for like 8 years in multiple different ways of I have gotten some grants, thank goodness, but not in this space. And I don't quite know why, except that most of the time, the version of a social interaction task that I propose is not the favored social interaction task that somebody else wants. Because if you look at this, there are so many things that make up social interaction. So if you're a language person, and I'm not talking about social language and social interaction, it's already a dead in the water thing. Like, forget it. We're not going to talk about that. If you're a gesture person and I'm not measuring gesture, forget it. Gesture is really important to social interaction. Well, okay, let's take this collected wisdom of 8 years and now say, it's all important. What is it about all of it? How can we actually step back and say, what else might matter? So we're getting there. Another student who just defended, Trent Simmons, came from here. He was actually in the language and communication disorders program for a year before he moved with me to Northeastern. And he was developing this two-person virtual interaction task where they were playing a game together. And they're playing a puzzle game where they're making basically these in A on the left, there's basically these patterns, and your job is to take the pattern, say in number 4, and take blocks that are falling down, pick them up and put them on the green locations in number 3. And your partner on the other side of that wall is going to be doing the same thing. You're doing this in real time. One of the things I really like about games for interactive tasks and movements that people aren't really thinking about the performance. They're not thinking, what are they measuring in me? What am I doing it right? No, they're just playing. And if you make a reasonable game, then they're really just performing and you don't have to worry about that. And you can generally get pretty good behavior for an extended period of time. So Trent worked at this for a long time. This is a big part of his dissertation. He had 2 versions of this task, but we constructed this so we could look at gaze. So we find a cube that's falling. You look at it, grab it, I guess, with your eyes, and then you grab it with the controller, and then you move it and you place it. So there are many different components to this that are measurable. And we had, first results. It was in a IEEE conference on games, small paper, and then it's now a transactions paper. And we found some nice results, but it was more like just getting the paradigm together. We saw differences between group autistic, not autistic, whether they were playing solo or whether they were playing in a competitive environment. And there are just all these slight differences in time. I would say the biggest difference here is in the time it took to place the cube was faster, actually, in the competitive condition versus the solo condition. But in doing this, and this happens in all the cool experiments, right, is like, even though there were 2 people playing against each other, there wasn't really that demand to interact. They are playing and their time, you're racing, you're trying to make your puzzle completed faster than the other person, but they didn't have to interact. They were co-located in space, but it wasn't a true interaction game. You were basically just racing against each other and you could see what the other person is doing. So we changed it. So we did a couple things. So the reason why that nice little purple screen is now an X is because we wanted to make sure that the participants who sit on these little green pads, if you can see with footprints on them, could actually see the person on the other side. One of the things about eye tracking in VR is that you're always ray casting, right? And a ray cast that hits, even if it's an invisible wall in your space, that's where it's going to count the gaze. And that's what happened here, right? It hits that purple invisible wall, not the person standing behind it. Oops. So we can't really look at gaze to the other person very much. As it turns out, I'm not even going to show you data about gaze to the other person because they don't do it. They don't look at each other. Doesn't matter. Autistic, not autistic, doesn't matter. They're focused on the task. They're not looking at their partner. They're not looking at their partner even when we construct a collaborative task. So what's also different about this, there's a couple different kinds of cubes that can fall in this X. They come at different speeds. And then there's this special one that's gold that you have to grab together. When the pattern calls for a gold cube, each of you has to grab a piece of it and place a piece of it. So that requires timing, coordination, knowing where your partner is. You have to at least monitor their behavior. So now we have a solo condition, the competitive condition, which is the same as before, and a collaborative condition. And importantly, this really complex looking figure down below is showing you how we can measure eye, head, and hand at different phases of this task. Now, I'm calling it phases of a task, but yet there's a lot of things you can do. You can look over at the pattern. What block am I going for? Oh, I want a red block. Okay. Okay, now I'm looking, I found a red block. I'm going to grab the red block. I'm going to go over. Where do I put the red block? Hopefully I remember where the red block goes, and you drop it in its spot, right? And if you're coordinating with someone else, you might also check in with the other person's pattern to see where they're going. Are they also trying to get the same block, right? So now we're in a position of looking at timing in this space. And I will say that the student also graduated, got a job, and had a great thesis. This work plus, if anyone's interested in Rocket League, talk to me later. We're doing some computer vision work and eye tracking in the eSport Rocket League. But this last bit of the experiment has left unpublished, right? It's not yet out the door, and there's a lot more analysis that we need to do, but he too has a job, and that's great. So, you know, gotta get them jobs, right? It's like I could have a miserable student hanging around my lab for another year and get a paper out, or I could, just let them go. Yeah, that was the right choice. So here, what we're looking at with respect to sort of the triggered onset time, we're looking at an eye movement, a hand movement, and a head movement, right? So here, it's looking at like an orienting to a cube moving down, right? And so same event, we're like eye, head, and hand starting, and as is common, the eye doesn't necessarily start first. So it's the eye is the solid, the head is the dotted. It starts just a wee bit after the hand, and that's weird. But it really pumps up fast, right? So the bulk of it goes faster, and so your eye gets there before the hand and the head and the hand come together. This is in a non-autistic participant. We see a very different pattern in the autistic participants, right? So there is a much bigger gap in time between the eye onset and the hand onset, and the head is not doing nearly as much work. The eye is doing more work. This is interesting. So there's a lot to study here. I'm very happy to have anybody who'd like to look at this data because we've got a lot of it. What we've seen in aggregate is that we've looked at like the slices in time, grab, place. So the grab movement, we have really big differences in head rotation and in some hand velocity, so time to place, hand, head, time to place velocity. And notice the middle condition is the one where there's the big difference. That's the collaborative condition. The one that's competitive, it's not the solo, it's the one where you're working together. That's the one where we're seeing all the differences. There's something about the having to work together that disrupts the timing of the autistic movements. Interesting. That's a piece. And then just generally speaking, placing the data, we see differences in average hand velocity. That's across all of the movements, and for whatever reason, it's actually lower. They're similar, but there's slower velocity in that collaborative condition. So they're faster when they're doing something that's a little bit more independent, but still really different and faster overall. That relates to something we'll talk about later. So here I'm just looking at velocity. We also need to look at higher moments like acceleration and jerk in a meaningful way, because other people have found differences there. And I expect that we have it too. Okay, so we're headed into the home stretch. So I'm pulling this data together. We're seeing a lot of differences in timing, in movement, and some hints that these differences are multiplied in, but I'm also feeling like I don't want to try to pitch another VR and social interaction task, because apparently to a lot of people out there, VR doesn't happen, social interaction doesn't happen in VR. So at least according to some reviewers, that's a no-go. And then constructing these social tasks is challenging. So I have another idea. I'm thinking about this as a puzzle. Why are we way back there? Wow. Okay, so now we're catching up. We should be one more along. Oh, someone has something in the chat.
Yeah, I already answered that question.
Oh, thank you. Okay. There we go. All right. So I see this as a puzzle. So I have tried to put together a couple pieces that we know we see movement differences in autism. We've seen them over many, many years. What do they mean and why? There do seem to be increases in differences with movement and social interaction. That's something that we're pushing on. And that movement timing is a key part of those differences. So those are the pieces I feel like we have various bits of evidence that we know really well. So now I'm going to show you a couple studies from other people that I think pull other bits together. And one is that movement components and interaction synchrony. So this is a study that has been looking at, and it's catching up, right? So there's a concept called interpersonal motor coordination. There's actually a bunch of people out there doing this. Interpersonal motor coordination is most often studied in the visual realm. I'm a visual scientist at my roots and core, so I'm cool with this. But what this study did is looking at this with respect to audio motor coordination, showing that it's actually more of a general phenomenon than expected. That basically so I picked this study to show you because it's highlighting this idea that there are sub movements, like tiny little pieces of movement, bits where people go faster or slower, that actually really matter when you're coordinating with someone. And you tend, in good coordination scenarios, you mirror that. Somebody goes a little bit faster, in the next bout, you go a little bit faster. It's really interesting. This interpersonal motor coordination, I think, is a really rich area to study. And these are relatively recent papers. This is from last year. So, so specifically, they are looking at the kinetics, people's kinematics, and how these altered patterns not only relate to their how much they synchronize, but in other work, how much they understand each other. Okay, so I'm going to pull that piece and say, like, that might be a part of the puzzle. But we also appear to be much better at interpreting movements that are similar to our own. And autistic performers' movements are sufficiently different than our own that this might cause a challenge. We know this for a long time, actually. We just don't relate it. This paper is from 2008, and it made a bit of a splash. So when we're looking at elite basketball players making free throws, right? We can show this to people while we're measuring their they were measuring EEG or in this study, and they were looking at the time when observers say that that's going to be a shot or a miss. And the two classes of observers they had were fellow elite basketball players or people with similar visual experience, either as coaches or the folks who sit in the stands commentating, right? I don't know what you think, who is going to do better at predicting? Yeah, the players, right? So, and of course it is the players. The players actually can predict before the ball even leaves the hand. Strong evidence that it's actually, they're watching their movements and they know something from their own body, the way they move, about how that's going to go, and they can predict it. And so this is a nice study, and it's actually been out there for quite some time, showing that there's something about the knowledge that the body brings of your own lived experience and movement that's interpreting the actions of others. But it gets weirder, right? So this is my other hope to soon be friend, Jennifer Cook's research. She has been looking at, so the lower paper is from 2016. Does anyone know the Heider-Simmel images, the animations? Of course you do, yeah. So you can make these cute little constructed images that are quote unquote social with little triangles harassing the circles or the squares, and they look like in the upper right, there's basically a box, and there are triangles and squares and circles that bounce around, and you can actually make them move so that, like, circle can look like it's pushing the triangle into the box, right? It looks like you could make videos that look like harassment or love, and it works. And this is Heider-Simmel. This is published in 1944. Okay, this is old, but people have been using it, and also using it with autism. So here, they got a group of autistic performers and not autistic performers to make very, very clearly stated, I want you to make an animation like this that does this, right? And it's like, I know this kind of harassment. The circle is going to harass the triangle and it's going to do this. And they said the same thing to the non-autistic performers. Then they showed those they made them with magnets underneath the table. So it was their kinematics, the way they moved, that was embedded in the animations. Then they showed the animations to a bunch of observers. I know, that's so cool. The ones that were understood at a much higher rate were the ones made by the non-autistic performers, whose kinematics were more similar to the observers. So now what was left undone there was that it's been shown that there's greater acceleration and jerk. Remember I said that this has been found before? Greater acceleration and jerk in movements of autistic people. So 2001 study went back and used, like, did a really huge study of lots of people, not specifically autistic at all, just like tons and tons of people, and did the same kind of study. And you were better at understanding the animations for people whose kinematics were more similar to yours.
Type of our
So you would actually, so this is the argument. We're really good at statistics, picking up statistics, but you couldn't put your finger on what's different. You know if something's different, but it's different in a like sort of we could put a line through the space, but like it's not different in one particular way. Yes.
This is a general question, but is it universal that
Yes. So this
Can
data
you
is from
repeat
children.
Can you
There's
repeat
a
the
big,
question?
database, the Spark database, 12,000 people, and a woman named Anjana Bhatt, physical therapist at the University of Delaware, put out a survey. That's a developmental coordination survey. 87% of the participants came through on that survey as positive, right? So this is common. But, and here's why I'm puzzled. I'm really looking for, because I don't think that it's necessarily different. So you all know how we identify autism. It's a like, because so-and-so said that it sits in this space, right? There's no biomarker, there's no nothing, right? So, I mean, we know children with Down syndrome have some motor differences too. Developmental disorders often have motor differences. What is it about this? And I'm gonna get back to that in just a moment. I think I have a suggestion. Yes. Oh, there's Gary, hi. So, repeat the question. So, what percentage of, is it common for individuals with autism to have motor differences? And the answer is very much yes. And Anjana Bhatt's work, I think 2021 is the seminal paper that highlights that. Yes.
or autistic people better battling autistic.
That's great. Not necessarily. That work is only just being done. And I have a next good question. So, right. So now I'm going to say, now this is like one of the more sad studies that I've ever seen. And this is also old, but I think it really matters. And you know, I'm coming from like a place where, you know, connectionist, development is really, feedback is really important. You all got that. You know, we had Jeff Ellman here, right? So I'm showing you a paper here from Anne Warlimont back in 2014, but I think the first one was 2008, where she was using the Lena device in little babies, some of whom went on to an autism diagnosis. And again, for TDLC, you know that this is right. What you really want is for mom, dad, whomever's around you. Oh, yeah, you're talking to me, right? Unfortunately, when you look at statistics of what was happening, is that the babies who went on with an autism diagnosis were actually trying to make speech. It wasn't recognized as such. Their environment did not give them the feedback to encourage that speech. We have this in the literature. It's been there for a long time. That's feedback's important. Yes.
Was there something different about the way that they were forming for the speech, or was it that the adults felt just?
That's a great question. I think the answer is likely a little bit of both. But yes, certainly to the first part, but also probably yes, also to both. Okay, so feedback can be important in this space. We certainly expect that it would be, right? How we think about development. But so the two pieces that I am really looking to make, and I can tell you how I'm trying to do it, is body movement similar to speech in this way? Is the way in which we move early in development and how we get feedback about that movement really important to the way in which we move in the future? And what is it? Could this actually explain, if instead of going after first, but really trying to relate social interactions in this complex, messy way that social interactions are thought of, could we think about what we call thin slice judgments? And if you're not familiar with the thin slice judgment work, it's wild. This is a study. So Ruth Grossman was publishing on this in 2015 with kids. And so this is a place where we're starting to have Mike on what people who with autism say. Thank you. About this. So, yeah. Oh, it didn't work. So, well, we'll just be in the dark. So, thin slice judgments are basically, you know, the system one, the really fast interactions that the judgments that we make about each other instantaneously. So what happened in this study, and this is very highly cited study and from 2017, Noah Sasson's the first author, they took 60-second videos in which no one came out looking great. They asked people to say for 60 seconds, make a pitch to put yourself on a reality TV show. I sure wouldn't. You know, nobody comes out looking wonderful and it's not great. But what they did is it sliced that. They took the first 10 seconds of that and they took the full video, just the video portion, excluding the audio, just the audio, a single shot, a frame from before speech started to happen, before there was any gesture, that one frame, and the separately the said in text. And then they presented these, they had autistic performers and not autistic performers. They presented it to several hundred people, undergrads on campus, and they asked them two sets of, I think it was 2 sets of 10 questions about affiliation. Would you want to sit next to this person? Would this person make a good friend? Do you trust them? Do you, I mean, and they're, you know, pretty serious, you know, evaluation, but there's these snap judgments that we make about each other. And it's bad. The autistic performers perform so much less well. And in this, they come out like incredibly negative. This is why this was such a highly rated. It's like, blow your mind. Like, what? What? I think it's movement. I think it's got to be movement. So at the end of this paper, the authors say, maybe it's how they're dressed. Maybe it's their hair. I'm like, oh, come on, right?
I'll go with it.
10 seconds. 10 seconds.
But also from the single still, you can still.
Yes. So from the single still, so I went to the person I'm working with on this work. I mean, trying to put together, you know, successive grants and now the studies that we're planning is a woman named Dagmar Sternad, who's a motor researcher. And so when I said, I love this, except the movement, she's like, no, it's fine. The still frame. That's fine because it's posture.
Mm.
But it's posture even before a gesture, which is interesting. So the audio too, audio alone also gets these negative judgments, right? But I'm considering that movement too.
I think the focus should not be on the subject. It should be also on what the statement, right? So yes, the example you gave that the mother is telling the child, "Oh, speak, speak," but so they said both.
So you already bought the punchline, and I love it. But we'll get there. That's
Just connecting. I don't know, there's all like, or like reviews of people lectures from like the very short correlates very well with who actually.
yes. I mean, this is apparently how we vote for president. Yeah. Terrifying. Anyway, so these things are interesting, but I believe that this movement is actually really important here, and this is something that we're well set up to engage because, you know, one of the other comments is that it's facial expression. Okay, but I can take away facial expression. In fact, I can actually record these and I can make everyone look like Shrek or Cinderella. Doesn't matter because we got all those tools. What about autistic observers? Thank you, Gwen. So yeah, so in some of Ruth's studies, she looks at autistic kids and they are just as negative in their judgments as typical. And I was surprised by that. I think she was too. Here's the thing, and this relates to your comment. So I think that there's, and I'd be happy to talk, but we're at time. I think there are two things to take away from this. One is that like there's a lot of the feedback in the environment that can be controlled. If we're specifically spending all of our time intervening on the child, we're missing a huge part of the equation. The feedback that the child gets is a big deal. And one of the reasons why I'm pretty certain that we can say that is because in all of these studies, if you tell observers that, oh yeah, and by the way, some of these individuals may be autistic, it changes everything. Disclosure changes everything. And so this is why I think I don't have this data and I haven't been able to find it, but children who have a developmental disorder and who move differently and are dysmorphic, where there's some sort of facial indicator of difference, they don't experience this same way. When it's invisible and you're just, I don't understand how you're moving. I can't make sense of you. I can't predict your, and so there's a couple of places where I can easily get myself in trouble in a grant. Is this about prediction? I'm working also with Pavan Sinha at MIT. He wants to talk about prediction, like, yes, maybe, but that also puts it, is it not all about prediction? It's kind of like categorical in some places. So we're doing a lot of these things. In fact, Terry, I'm actually doing learning where to look as well as when to look, just
Oh, good.
FYI. Yes. So we have a paradigm where we've done some learning when to look. There's these subtle differences when we're trying to get people to look at a place, but where we're really pushing on is doing that when to look paradigm while people are standing on a balance board and reaching. So now we've got kinematic data when they're doing things like this. And we're asking them to do a hopefully slightly less awkward, like, now I need you to make a 60-second pitch for recruiting other people to this study. Okay, so go. Right? And so that's how we're getting our videos for thin slice judgments, but we're going to add these controls where I can make everyone wear the same clothes. In fact, look exactly the same. I can take away their facial expression. And I think that this is what's going to get us to that opportunity. How might we use this consideration to think differently about early intervention and feedback? And with that, I want to thank you. This is my lab. I had the pleasure of having Bojo was here over the summer. He's the guy in the front, a visiting student. Trent is midway in, and Minchin is near the on the backside. Both of those students contributed to the work I showed you today, but it's really a group effort. We have an awesome group. And that's it. Thank you.
So could I ask a question, Leanne?
Yes.
Okay, so Liz Torres, do you know her?
I do. In fact, the word micro movement came up. You know, I don't here. I'll do this. Yeah, the word micro movement came up. I think Liz was absolutely on this early. It's the way she talks about her work. I don't think she's been heard, but I should probably go back. I connected her with some people in my speech department because she was working on speech now, but I should go back to her and see.
Yeah, so she has really developed. She was here on sabbatical, so I talked to her about this. She put a lot of effort into assays for movement and showed that there was big differences and that you could, objective differences that you can get early on in autism. And I think you did some work along those lines too, right? Walking.
Yeah, well, so actually walking was Marisa, but I did some dyspraxia studies, but yes, I mean, so her micro movement perspective, I think really fits into what people are calling the sub-component movements. I think that unfortunately, she had like really beautiful mathematical treatment and it just buried the point, I think, for her, like for whatever reason, like people didn't pick it up. But I think it's time again. I don't know. I'm certainly going after it. So I would be happy to re-engage with her. I appreciate the reminder. As I was preparing for this, I was like, oh, I need to talk to Liz. Well,
no. I'm just, reconnecting you. But another thing, I'm not sure if you're familiar, a long time ago, Dana Ballard did a study with Mary Hayhoe. And, your first slide about, following the gaze and during a task, they used that as a task for active vision. So the idea was that, you're not looking at the whole scene. You're looking at pieces of it, and it has to be coordinated with your eye movements, have to be coordinated with plans. And so I mean, I don't think they certainly didn't go into autism, but I think they had a lot of really good data there.
Yeah, I think they did a lot of walking. I've seen some of their peanut butter and jelly studies. But yeah, I mean, I think this space is now we've got the tools we can do that. We need to do more of it. But yeah, and Andrea has a question here too. Yes.
I was just curious. I was going through my mind. Has anyone looked at coordination between heartbeat and respiration? And
so to get like with another person or
no, just within their own internal coordination between you know, how heart rate's nesting
Yeah.
in respiration.
I would love to work with you on that. I don't think so. The big interoception or interception person is Carissa Casio, and I don't believe she's done that.
It's things like heart rate's very little, but
Yeah.
how the cycles.
Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah, show Mark. Hi.
I'm curious about the dynamics of social interaction. So
Yes.
the ability we have to switch from agency of
Ah.
movement, if it correlates where with their ability to absolutely.
That's really interesting. So people have done adaptation studies of those sorts, movement, and it's definitely been shown that autistic individuals adapt more slowly. They can adapt. It's just a different time course. And I think that showing it, like, reminding people that the motor realm might be really reflective of the social realm, or how we're naming these things, I think is important. And I was reminded of a study that I was looking at as I'm preparing not just this talk, but grants and what have you, that you get a lot more oomph out of a social, like a facial expression if the body's involved. I always remember Judy Riley. I don't think Judy Riley can talk without her hands, right? She's, she's so enthusiastic, and that confers a lot more of a signal. But if that's true, generally speaking, if people are moving differently, then you're understanding movement differently from people who are moving differently. That extra signal isn't necessarily as useful. So I'm trying to think both about performance, even the natural, just visual. Yes. So I hope I asked that question. Is there any other question? Answer that question in the group.
Just those in the chat.
Oh, chat. Yeah. Let me see. Okay. So Gwen asked, what about autistic observers? Average over the two. So sorry, I asked that
Hello?
question. Yes. Hi.
I'm watching Leanne talk, but
Hey, Gary, do you have a question?
okay.
I think Gary is having a different social interaction. With us and others.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this whole thing, I mean, you know, Marty and Javier and emotion. I mean, it's just
I
like,
haven't
oh,
seen him.
I have to go to UCSD, and then Margaret invited me. I'm like, okay, I have to go to UCSD to get some feedback. This is clearly the place. So yeah, so we clearly have a lot more work to do. We're in the data collection phase of that balance and look, but I think we're set up well. We're going to go after a grant next in February, but I'm trying to pull off like other pieces of this because it is a major thrust of my work, and I'm excited about it. So if anything comes to you later, you have any questions, comments, I would love to receive it. I think you mostly know where to find me. And for those of you who are new, a bunch of other people here know how to find me. So thank you very much again for your question.
So thank you so much, Leanne. It's wonderful to have you back.
Thank you.
And your work is great as always. All sorts of- So I'm sure people would like to chat. So we do have a little, very casual INC style tea back
Thank
here,
you.
even though it's lunch. We still do tea.
Well, thank you. And I'm sorry I can't have tea with all of you online too, but I hope to connect with you offline sometime soon. Thank you. Right. Thank you. It's good to see you here.
So,
Yes.
Leanne, when are you coming to ANFA? It's here at the Salk, right?
Yeah, so I'm there tomorrow. And I could be there tomorrow evening. If that works. I think that's the plan. I think Andrew's supposed to be there Friday evening, and I can try to get back Friday evening too. But
Oh,
Friday.
no, I can meet with you anytime on Thursday.
Okay. Great. So I think in the afternoon, so my talk and like panel sessions are in the morning. So
Okay,
I can
okay.
speak out
Oh,
in the afternoon. Yeah.
okay, great. So let's get together in the afternoon.
Excellent. I will send you a message.
Send me a message when you're free. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Terry. I look forward to that.
Yep. See you tomorrow.
Bye. Thanks, Gary. Thank you all for coming.